I want to take the opportunity to welcome all of you to this afternoon's engagement. I guess it's going to get quite exciting. This is actually the first of the School of Business e-seminar series, and we are coming to you live from our various offices, from our various homes, from our various countries. The maiden edition, which is actually today's conversation, is on the theme, the coronavirus pandemic, and it's focusing on a number of issues. These issues has got to do with a very significant area of our lives that we have ignored. And when I say very significant areas that we have ignored, is coronavirus pandemic and household anxiety and well-being. I guess this is quite a strategic area that should engage our attention for the next 2 hours. My guest, as you can see, I have Dr. Kwabena Jan Kwakye. Dr. Kwakye, can you give us a wave? Okay, so Dr. Kwakye is an economist with the World Bank Ghana office, and his entire working life has involved macroeconomic reporting and economic policy analysis, public financial management, poverty reduction, gender-related issues, employment and social protection. Dr. Kwakye has gained the foundations in these areas while working in the Ministry of Finance of Ghana for a decade. And since joining the World Bank in January 2017, he has impacted the same space, more particularly in economic policy, domestic resource mobilization, and public finance management, as he helped to deliver a development policy operations, and currently as a co-task team leader of the World Bank's Investment Project Finance Project. The World Bank's broader goals of eradicating extreme poverty and shared prosperity through employment remain a great influence on his ambition to promote development by influencing public policy. And that is why this afternoon we are very much excited to have you join with us. Once again, I welcome you, Mr. Kwabena Jan Kwakye.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your kind words.
Okay, listeners, on the table we also have Professor Megan McCoy, and Megan is a professor of practice and the director of the Personal Financial Planning Master's Program at Kansas State University. Megan's education began in the area of marriage and family therapy, but evolved into financial therapy when she began to do co-joint financial therapy sessions with financial planners. Her research has been published in a range of journals such as the Journal of Financial Therapy, the Annals of Business Review, the Journal of Financial Planning, the Journal of Family Economic Issues, the American Journal of Family Therapy, Journal of Systemic Therapies, Journal of Couple and Family Therapy, and the Journal of Sex and Marital Therapy, to name a few. Dr. McCoy serves as a secretary for the Board of Financial Therapy, and in addition, she is the associate editor of profiles and book reviews for the Journal of Financial Therapy. Megan, good afternoon, and you're welcome to this session.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, we also have Dr. Anoche Adam. Dr. Anoche Adam is a senior lecturer in finance and head of Department of Finance, School of Business, University of Cape Coast, of course, with the College of Humanities and Legal Studies. And his research area is in the areas of applied econometric and person finance. Dr. Adam, good afternoon. Of course, and last but not the least, we have the Dean of the School of Business, University of Cape Coast, Professor John Gatchie. Professor Gatchie doesn't like elaborate introduction. He's quite allergic to that, so I will leave him there. Professor Gatchie, good afternoon. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, as a rule of the thumb, this is how the program is going to be. We will give an opportunity for an introductory remarks by the chair, which happens to be the Dean of the School of Business, Professor Gatchie. And after his remarks, I would take the opportunity to give each of you 5 minutes. I know Megan is going to make a little bit of an elaborate presentation. So Megan, I think you and I can go for about 10 minutes. That wouldn't harm anybody, okay? So first and foremost, Chair, who will take your introductory statement?
As the moderator indicated, today is the first session of our e-seminar series. And we have carefully chosen the topic coronavirus pandemic, household financial anxiety, and well-being. And one will ask, why do we choose this topic? It's very simple, that we have witnessed a lot of discussion on the effect of coronavirus pandemic, but these discussions are focused on the macro level. For example, on the fiscal management situation in various countries, monetary policy management in various countries, balance of payment effect, growth momentum as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, and also job losses. In fact, some discussions also focus on disruption in the global supply chain and affecting import and export to a large extent. On March 2, 2020, the OECD reported that the balance of payment distortions will be much more pronounced in developing countries if intensive outbreak in Europe, North America, and Asia Pacific were not contained quickly. This will negatively affect intermediate import for the manufacturing sectors in developing countries, including Ghana, and this will also hugely affect exports. Job losses for businesses which depend on import are expected to escalate. Total import is projected to reduce from around $13 billion in 2019 to around $9 billion in 2020. Export will reduce from around $15 billion to around $11 billion in 2020, and this will widen the current account deficit, even though because of huge drop in demand for import as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, we have experienced some short-term current account surplus that will be disrupted when demand for import become active. Other projections for our economy as a result of the coronavirus pandemic include fiscal deficit, which will get very close to around 9.5%, and primary balance, which will deteriorate to negative 4.1, having effect on our debt management strategy and containment of our expenditure. Growth is expected to reduce to a low of around 1.5%, which is supposed to be the lowest within the period of about 37 years. Financial sector and monetary policy measures have been taken, and we need to monitor financial sector and monetary policy measures so that they do not translate into greater risk for the economy if coronavirus pandemic is not controlled quickly or is not over quickly. Why this topic? In all the discussions, we have not paid attention to the effect of coronavirus pandemic on personal finance. Personal finance in our discussion would include family finance, retirement finance, and personal savings or household savings, which we already know is very low. The pandemic is likely to have greater effect on women and young entrepreneurs. Many families do not have emergency savings and investment to fall on during the pandemic. Small family businesses, micro and small businesses have lost both operating capital and cash flow. Vulnerability and inequalities have deepened. There seem to be weak social protection schemes in developing countries, including ours. Reduction in remittances for many families as a result of the intensity of the outbreak in countries where our families, our people, our loved ones live and make remittances for projects at home and for livelihood support. Many family businesses need recapitalization and new strategies to regain strength. While outlining some of these effects on personal finance and families and households, we need to stress the point that these effects translate or create what we call psychological problems for households. These effects also create or develop various health challenges for people, household and families as a result of the the effect that I outlined earlier. Of course, these effects of coronavirus pandemic also create anxiety for households, for our families, and for individuals. That is the reason why this topic is apt and appropriate for our consideration. And I'm very grateful that we have seasoned people to discuss this all-important topic for our consumption, to actually contribute to policy direction. We have our professor from Kansas State University who focuses on financial therapy. We have our head of department, Dr. Anoche. We also have our colleague from the World Bank office in Accra, who are going to deliberate on these matters. On that note, I want to thank you, and I hand over to the moderator to allow our discussant to do justice to the topic. Thank you very much.
Professor Chair, thank you very much for the detailed, analysis of the problem. And I think it gives us a real picture of what we are dealing with, not just as a country, but the global world. And I believe that what Ghana is experiencing may not be entirely different from what other African countries are experiencing, or the Caribbean. And so I believe Megan is coming on board with a lot of experiences. And so we want to just start to pick up your impression of this specific topic that we're dealing with. Megan, and I want to begin with you.
Just in general, you're saying? Well, I think COVID has created a global experience, and the thing about COVID-19 in my experience is that everybody's individual experience is different, but some of the macroeconomics is having a similar impact throughout the world. So I'm not sure if you would like me to talk more through my presentation or just end on that kind of.
Mr. Kwabena Jan Kwache, to share your thoughts on the theme with us, and I'll give you 5 minutes if that's okay for you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that Prof basically rounded up my views on the topic as it is, in terms of trying to zero in on the household and as an agent in the economy, and how the coronavirus is actually impacting on their household in terms of their funding. And we all know that the household is basically a fundamental agent within the economy. So if the household does not function in terms of having the right or the desired income to spend, then definitely it has ripple effects on the entire economy, because as we know, firms basically depend on how much household actually spend in terms of the goods and services they procure. And then based on that, firms are able to expand their businesses, and then we have that vicious cycle. So I'm very happy to be part of this conversation and to actually dig deep in terms of how the COVID is impacting on the household, and how best we can, or government can actually address these shortcomings or these problems as far as the household is concerned, and then make life better for household. So I'll end here, and as we go on, I am looking forward to a good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. You've made it quite brief, and I think I like that, because there are a number of questions that are coming your way. So prepare and stand by.
Yeah, good afternoon to you all. And I'm happy to be part of this discussion. And I think Dean touched a number of things. And besides the health implications and fatalities that we are experiencing, COVID has the potential to collapse our economics and social lives. And as we can see what is happening across the group, generally countries are experiencing worse economic impact, and you see global financial markets are crashing. For example, between March 6th and March 18th, S&P 500 lost about 15% of its value. And this is a huge lost in terms of when it comes to finance. And we see most major indices are nosediving. So you realize that the economic impact is huge. Now they say when America sneezes, the world catches flu or cold. And what happens when America catches a cold? That is a huge question that I'm asking. You realize that the residual impact of what is actually happening in terms of impact of COVID-19, most of the discussions have been centered on corporate and probably the macroeconomic impact. But the ultimate residual impact falls on the households. But often when we are discussing, we tend to only look at the macroeconomic policy interventions, though those impacts trickles down to that of the households. And households face a lot of challenges in terms of income, loss of income, in terms of remittances and support from family members, like what the dean said, price hikes, and in terms of food and medicines are also going up. And we also have a disruption in our daily lives. All of them are impacting on our economic life in terms of the household. So I think this discussion is timely, for there is no end in sight for this pandemic. And therefore, it's necessary that we discuss the how to deal with it, because it says that we should find a way to live with the pandemic, because we don't know whether we are just ending the pandemic now. So we should learn how to live with it. So within this pandemic, how do we deal with our finances? And what is the way forward in terms of keeping our households together and our household finances in shape? So I think this discussion is timely, and it will help our all of us. It will inform all of us in terms of how to live with the pandemic and how to address our personal finance issues. And ultimately, it's also like micro units come together to form the macro. So if the household is able to come together, ultimately it will impact on the whole economy in general. So that is what I think I have for now.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. Megan, I think you are better now, right?
No, but I can just talk without a slide. That's no problem at all.
Okay.
So my slide set that I created was kind of created to introduce the idea of what financial therapy is. And part of that is derived from the intersection between financial health and general well-being. So I'll tackle that first. What we know is that financial health, financial stress can lead to mental health issues such as anxiety and depression. We know that financial stress can lead to physical issues such as obesity and cancer. In fact, what we have found is that prolonged chronic stress in some studies has been a larger carcinogen than even smoking. And so financial stress is going to have a dire consequence on your physical health. In addition, your financial stress could lead to relational issues. In America, is often quoted as one of the top causes of divorce. But the relationship is in one direction. Financial health and financial stress does not only impact overall well-being, but your overall well-being is going to impact your financial health. If you are having mental health issues, oftentimes some of the symptoms of mental health issues such as bipolar, depression, anxiety, and so on is overspending. If you're having physical health issues, there may be an acquisition of medical bills that causes more financial stress. And if you're having relational issues, that may come out in you being less focused on creating your financial goals with your partner. You may have retail therapy or overspend in other ways. And so there's this intersection between financial health and overall well-being that is hard to tackle one without tackling the other. And that is where the field of financial therapy developed from. In 2008, there was a group of us mental health professionals and financial professionals who said, we should be working on our clients' whole health. We should be focusing on all aspects of the client's care. And we should take what we know from each of our evidence-based research and apply it to our work. And so financial therapy was designed for both mental health professionals and financial professionals to help clients think, feel, and behave differently with money. And it's all based on research. It's our goal to really aid clients in moving towards financial health and overall well-being. And I know the word therapy can kind of be daunting, but I want you to think of financial therapy as massage therapy or physical therapy, in that we are therapizing our clients' relationship with money. Not that you as business students or finance students should be making your clients lay on a couch and talk about their dreams, but really you're aiding them to talk about their money differently. And this can be especially important if you work with clients that are couples in their financial health, because what we know is that money fights are just qualitatively different than other kinds of fights. They last longer, they're nastier. There was even one study that found that couples tend to use curse words more when they're talking about money than other areas of conflict. And so if you enter into the world of working with clients directly, are going to need some skills like counseling-like skills to be able to help them better address this term. And I think in light of COVID-19, the financial stress of our individual households has all risen. And of course, we've already discussed how many people are experiencing unemployment, but there's also so many furloughs going on. There's so much underemployment going on, and there's so much anticipation or anticipatory anxiety that we may lose our job. So even if your actual financial well-being is okay right now, your stress level about potentially having a negative future around finances can be impacting your well-being right now. So my job, I think today, is to add a more micro lens to the macroeconomics experts today and address more of what we see as financial anxiety or financial stress coming up from COVID-19. And one point of clarification around that is that financial stress is the real experience of an external stimuli impacting our financial well-being, that you are experiencing underemployment, that you are not having enough financial money to make the ends meet. But financial anxiety is when you remove that external stimuli and everything technically is okay if you're still fearful, if you're still worried that something bad's going to happen.
I think you've been quite generous with time. I thought you were going to take about 20 minutes, but it gives us a better perspective of the subjects that we're dealing with. And Megan, if you wouldn't mind, I think the next round of questions, about two, these questions are coming to you because I believe the subject is quite relevant regarding the presentation that you have made so far. And for our online attendees, you know how to ask your questions. Okay, so when the time is up, I'll just signal you and then you could ask your question. Again, you could also start writing to us. You see the column for Q&A just down the screen. You can start your questions. And then when the time is also right, I would ask these questions for our panelists to be responding to them. So Dr. Mikoy, you have an extensive clinical experience working with individuals, working with couples, working with families, an integrated clinic practicing financial therapy. I want to understand from you the presentation that you have made so far. What is financial therapy and how is it useful in this COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes, so financial therapy is a huge umbrella term that is the integrated care of mental health and financial aspects. And so in my integrated practice, I actually worked alongside with the financial planner, and we addressed clients who were having a host of issues around their financial well-being or their relational well-being. And we tackled it together as a team. After that integrated experience, I actually did financial therapy on my own. And I saw clients who were experiencing financial infidelity, financial conflict, and financial stress.
Okay, so as a financial therapist, what will be the major financial risk to household in this pandemic era?
Yeah, I think the biggest risk is, of course, the actual financial stress that families are under. The unemployment rate in America has skyrocketed, and I think is true for most of the world. And so I think dealing with the actual game plan and how to strategize with the decrease in finances, how to tap into government services to scaffold the family during this time of financial stress is our primary goal. I think of it as crisis attendance. You've got to make sure people are safe first. And then secondary, I think in households, different families, different members of the family will have different comfort levels with their financial stress. So for instance, in my family, my husband is very vigilant about money. He wants to make sure we're safe, and he sees it as his job to take care of the family. His threshold for comfort around financial stress is going to be much lower than mine. So that anxiety around finances, if it grows, he may let it out in different areas. And my job as a financial therapist is helping couples understand different presentations of anxiety. seeing that sometimes based on our super systems, our race, our gender, religion, anxiety may not come out as we think. It might come out as anger. It might come out as frustration. It may come out as checking Twitter too much. And so there's all these different manifestations around anxiety, and helping couples recognize when what themselves are experiencing it and when their partners experience it, so they can better support each other.
Okay, Mr. Jan, I know listening to Megan and listening to Dr. Andam, now you've been thinking of policy interventions, because I believe we've started picking the signals already as a country and a global world. We see a lot of agitations. We see a number of stresses, both internal and external. I want to find out from you what the World Bank Group is doing or possibly has done in addressing financial anxiety and the well-being of people.
Well, from the World Bank's point of view, the basic point of the World Bank is basically to reduce poverty and then also reduce inequality. And the bank has been working with governments around the world to achieve this. And in this coronavirus era, the bank, together with the government of Ghana, have actually rolled out a lot of interventions that are ongoing. For example, the coronavirus rapid response, which basically looked at converting government expenditures into clinical expenditures, into health-related expenditures. The bank actually moved in a very record time with government of Ghana to come up with $100 million. And out of the $100 million, 35 was new money and 65 million was old World Bank portfolio projects that were converted into a rapid response project. And there are other areas, for example, the bank basically coordinated with the government of Ghana to actually add an additional transfer of the current LEAP program that is ongoing. So basically to help the needy at the time when the pandemic actually came on. So basically, from our point of view, we look at 3 stages of looking at or dealing with this pandemic. We have a state where basically we work with government to give relief to the needy. And then the second stage is basically a recovery stage where we try to work with government to roll out various programs to actually help individuals, the household, as well as the firms, as well as SMEs, to recover from the fall as far as the pandemic effects are concerned. And then the third phase, which will be a little bit more medium to long term, will be to look at how to actually build the resilience of the economy, of households to actually withstand such situations when they come in the near future. So basically, in order not to give specifics, because I thought that we'll be delving more into specifics, but this is the 3 main ways that the bank is coordinating with the government of Ghana and also governments across the world. That
and Mr. Kwache, I wish you be specific. You're saying that it's not just at the central level that the influence of World Bank is being felt, but also at the household level. Would you be specific with the exact prescriptions or policy interventions?
Yeah, so the way the World Bank works with host governments to roll out specific programs to reach its people. So you wouldn't find the bank categorically going straight to the people to work with, but then it will always go through the central government. And then I gave an example of instances when the COVID pandemic broke out in Ghana. From March up to this time, we've seen a COVID-19 emergency preparedness program, which is worth $100 million, which was rolled out together with between the bank and the government of Ghana. We have also seen the bank, through the bank's intervention and deliberations with the government of Ghana, we've seen government transferring an additional disbursement for LEAP, Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty beneficiaries. We are having one more disbursement, which is an additional one planned for 2020. So these are all emergency reliefs that were rolled out in order to basically, together, I mean, without deliberation with the government of Ghana, rolled out to be able to curb the impact, the direct impact that the COVID-19 is impacting on households. So basically, these are the areas that we have worked so far. But then going forward, there are many more programs that the bank hopes to speak to the central government or the government of Ghana to actually help improve on the recovery of firms and households as far as their incomes are concerned, and then also improve on their resilience going forward.
Okay, now Mr. John Kwache, we know, and the World Health Organization has been drumming this home on second-by-second basis that world economies must now prepare the various systems, health economies, to know that COVID-19 has possibly come to stay. We have no idea when we are going to get out of this. Help us understand whether, World Bank can give some policy prescriptions for countries to deal with financial and psychological consequences of people.
From the World Bank point of view, we think that when it comes to fighting pandemics such as this, there are always choices that need to be made. So basically, in terms of whatever decision that governments have to make, there are always trade-offs. For example, there's always a trade-off between saving lives and saving livelihood. What this means is that if you remember, if we could all remember when we had a partial lockdown in Accra, Kumasi, and their environs. We remember the narratives that came in terms of the well-being of individuals who had to survive by their daily work. So definitely people couldn't survive going forward in terms of their livelihood. But then the government, right from the beginning, had to make a very difficult decision of a lockdown so that we can take some form of better view of the development of the virus and the spread, and then and see how best to actually remove those lockdowns. So it's always difficult for government to choose between, for example, saving lives from a virus spread and also trying to help the people survive in their livelihoods. Now, from the bank, from the World Bank's point of view, we always support that government should take decisions in terms of making policies that are more or less able to keep balance in these kind of trade-offs. And for Ghana, we also think that whatever that the governments have to, the decision that governments have to take will always have to be country specific. And in the case of Ghana, we have seen that right from the beginning, there was that rapid response, as I mentioned, but then going forward, the bank is deliberating with government in many of all these, or the bank supports a lot of these policies that government is rolling out in terms of, for example, supporting the businesses that through the coronavirus alleviation program, where about 600 million cedis has already been voted to support the SMEs. And then also we support the government decision to actually give reliefs to individuals through food distribution, especially during the lockdown. So these are the areas that the bank always supports the government in terms of the decisions that they have taken. And as Prof mentioned earlier on, we also support basically the macro decisions that were taken, for example, in cutting down interest rate by the central bank, and also the government trying to opt to borrow from the central bank instead of borrowing from individuals through the banking system. We know that from Economics 101, we know that if governments borrow from commercial banks, it means that the central bank is actually, the central government is actually crowding out private sector business. So basically, the government opting to borrow from the central bank will mean that this resources that would have been made available to government through the treasury bill issuances will now be available to the private sector going forward too. So these are the policy options that we support as a bank, and currently the government is undertaking. Over.
Okay, Megan, I want you to be thinking about this because after Dr. Anochie has made his submission, I would be asking the major interventions that you think at the individual level government should be making to mitigate, certain stress or challenge levels that if we do not address them now, will not be doing well as a nation. So start thinking about it. But Dr. Anochie, our economy is largely, informal, and we have a number of the Ghanaian people doing a lot of retailing. Help us understand this, how the Ghanaian household that are not financially literate can survive in this COVID-19 time.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, truly, most of our people are in the informal sector, and we have to look at the way this pandemic, because most of them are just living on a daily wages, especially those in artisanal industry, masons, seamstress, and those things that do market women and those things. If they don't go to market, then it means that they are out of their daily income is affected. But I think we need to look at the structure of our economy. We need to formalize make conscious effort to formalize our economy so as to increase the social security system or state interventions, because the state intervention, for example, if we look at maybe US, as maybe Megan will talk about it maybe later, you realize that government interventions are structured. It's because the economies are formalized. Now, in our system, we don't have a good data base to deal with some of these policies. And especially even when LEAP, for example, that are being distributed by the government, you realize that it ends up getting into the hands of people who are not in need, especially during the lockdown time. People who were queuing for food were not the people that truly they were to take the food. In fact, we have done some small survey, and the survey shows that people thought that there were a lot of skewness, unfairness in the distribution of some of these social intervention. Simple because we don't have data on some of these things to know that these are the households that need support, and these are the people within the low income bracket. So for us to deal with future problems, we need to look at how to formalize our system. But I also think that individuals should take their destiny into their own hands. That is also very important, because it looks like we always rely on the destiny that we don't have, our incomes are inadequate, and we have low savings culture. People don't save for the future. They don't plan for the future. And it's very, very important. You see, I just mentioned that if you look at those of us who go to church, every Sunday, we manage to get 1 cedi or 2 cedis for offering. We manage to pay tithe. However, the same income that you are able to save some for offering, tithe, and those things, we also complain that that income is not enough for us to save. So I think that individuals should make conscious effort to make savings culture part of their daily life. And if we do so, it would help them to come out of some of these challenges. It's because we don't plan for our future. So for me, we need to look at the way we live our life. And we also need to educate ourselves in terms of financial planning. Just because a lot of people are not literate. They don't know that we need how to even save and where to even save their money. In fact, this pandemic has come at the time where a lot of people have also lost their incomes in the cleanup of the financial sector. So it's a huge burden on most of the household. But the issue is that we need to look at our financial education. We need to look at it, take it serious, and educate our household, especially those in the informal sector, to make sure that we strengthen our savings culture. Make sure that people, whatever that we save, no matter how small it is, if you are able to save some for offering, you should also make the same conscious effort to also at least put small, either 1 cedi or 2 cedi elsewhere for future use, because we don't know what is going to happen. Uncertainty about life is something, it's inevitable, it's something that we cannot we cannot take away from in terms of our financial life. So we should make sure that we make sure people save, and financial education should be core of the government policy after COVID-19. We should take policies to make sure that we educate our people on how to save and how to make sure that our financial future or the financial well-being becomes secure. Because indeed, as Megan said, that you see, you can be financially well now, but the future uncertainty can make you financially not well. Because if you have that perception that in the future, I might lose my job, or I might not have the finances to deal with my personal finances, no matter what you have, it can affect you. And financial well-being itself has some connection with state of the mental health and the general state of health. And therefore, we need to look at it very well. It's a serious matter that we cannot joke with it, that we need to look at it.
Okay, it looks like there is a question quite related to what you have just said from one of our attendees, Dr. Anoche. So I would ask that quickly so that I can move on to Dr. McCoy. This one says, Dr. Anoche, is it not a case that there is lack of culture of savings and investment in times like this, hence the situation households face? What will your department do in terms of policy formulations on this?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think we need to begin to look at incorporating financial education, personal finance education in our curriculum, because it looks like it's a long overdue. We have thought of it, but I think it's a time for us to consider including personal finance in our curriculum serious, or even possible, making it a university-wide requirement, like a Finance 101, which will deal with personal finance. And it shouldn't have started with the university. We should have looked at it from secondary school, high school, to beginning to look at how to deal with our finances, to train individuals how to save, how to manage the personal finances, do diligent investment, so that we don't invest in Ponzi schemes and others. So we need to have started from the basic level or the high school level. But notwithstanding, we can, as a department, look at Finance 101, which will be probably a core course for all university students or university-wide course to deal with personal finance. And I'm sure from here, I'll get in touch with Megan for us to look at how to deal with some financial therapy courses as a Finance 101, and see how best with the dean we can incorporate into our finance course and possibly become part of our curriculum and training. And that, I'm sure, is going to help us, because it looks like people don't have financial education, no matter how educated a person is. We have some professors who are financially illiterate. We have even finance people who I would say that they are financially illiterate when it comes to personal finance issues, which we need to tackle seriously to make sure that we maintain the financial well-being of our people.
Okay, so Megan, I saw you nod at a number of the suggestions or proposals that Dr. Anoche put on board. Do you have some perspectives to share regarding savings culture?
Yeah, I think I loved so many of the points. I especially laughed out loud when you said how sometimes even finance professors are kind of like what's the old joke, the shoemaker's kids go without shoes, that sometimes we have to explore our own financial health before we can truly model it for our students. I'm actually doing a paper right now on the need for financial education throughout students' education, from primary school to high school to college, and that if we were able to get that in curriculum, we would have such a huge snowball effect, because what would happen is that children would start talking to their parents about finances, that the financial socialization around the family could then improve earlier on. The Center for Financial Wellbeing, I'm going to send out a chat, has the greatest resource on financial well-being. I just sent it in the chat if you want to look. I don't know if you want to send it to Facebook, but they talk about how there's so many influences to our financial well-being. And I loved how Dr. Adams talked about how we need the knowledge and skills, but I also think the Financial Bureau talks about how we also need to understand how our personality and attitudes will impact our financial behaviors, how our social and economic environment impacts our behaviors, and all of that will shape our actual actions around money. And so there needs to be both literacy about what you should do around finances while tackling some of the messages that we get around things like get rich quick schemes, or what we need to consume in order to be happy, and how to line up our values with our purchases. So there needs to be both literacy around financial behaviors and literacy around our attitudes and beliefs around money.
Okay, Megan, thank you. So on our Facebook page, Jonathan Nasona Zakaria says the impact of COVID-19 on households is worse for the poor and for the vulnerable families. But this is a question Vincent Asanfo is asking. How can small and medium enterprises take advantage of COVID to expand their businesses? I think, I don't know, Dr. Anoche, you may attempt to handle that one, or Megan could continue with it.
There is a huge potential for them to take advantage of what is happening, especially when there is a disruption in the global supply chain. There is we have especially if you look at what is happening in terms of mask, we have seen most of the SMEs entering into the production of face mask or nose mask for that. And it's one of the areas that they can take advantage. We have also seen a lot of SMEs entering into production of sanitizers, hand sanitizers, and it's okay. So now that there's a disruption in the global supply chain in terms of export, now people cannot go to their usual marketplace, China, to go and import. So as we have those restrictions, it's now that small businesses can take advantage of the short in supply of imports to look at how they can also substitute what we are unable to import. So there is a potential for SMEs, but the unfortunate thing is that, as the Dean indicated earlier, most of them have lost their capital. Okay, because of the initial disruptions, in economic disruptions and those things. So some of them don't have even money to expand. There are some of them they would have wished to probably enter into some aspect that now because of the restrictions and border closure and all those things that they want to enter, but they don't have enough distance. So is this the time that the government should give enough support to some of these businesses to enter into areas that they are capable or competent enough to to produce. And I'm sure
Dr. Noche, that's aside the stimulus package that is already been rolled out.
Yes, I think the we need, if you look at the analysis from the stimulus packages that they are giving out, it looks like it's inadequate if you look at the analysis and the number of SMEs that we have. Now, we see the economy is dominated with the SMEs and micro businesses. And the entire capital that they are working with, some of them are 100 cities, which is maybe 20, say $20 dollars or so. They have 200, 300, those are them. They can easily wipe off. So I think that we need to do more. Yes, government is giving some of this, but I think government can do more by looking at how it can cushion these SMEs to enter into most productive ventures to make sure that they sustain enough. And then probably in the process, they may take over even after the COVID-19, because if they're able to establish in the market, probably will not go outside again to import some basic commodities that we can easily produce in the market. Because I'm telling you, without the border, I think it's for the border closure that most of these businesses are now producing face masks. We have gone to China to go and import face masks. But it's because of some of these disruptions and those things that is causing or helping most of the SMEs to get opportunity to produce face masks and then also to produce sanitizers to support what is happening. So I think that we need to roll out policies to make sure that we give enough support to our SMEs to produce domestically and also to create jobs for the system, because there are huge job losses in terms of what has happened globally, not even Ghana alone.
All right, so our viewers, we are giving attention to a number of the concerns you have sent to us. Dr. Jan, this is coming to you, Mr. Kobne Jan Kwache. I think this is a beautiful title for you to pick up. It's from, Anonymous. It says, the World Bank response to the pandemic of $100 million is for government and other businesses, and the households are left out. How will the bank ensure that the needy in their household benefit from this intervention?
I already mentioned that that 100 million is just for the rapid response. There are many more existing World Bank programs that that exist before that has been helping in terms of, for example, sewage. We have the Gamma project going on. All these are livelihood form of projects that the bank has been embarking with government. Now, with respect to the COVID-19 and its impact on the poor, we think that government can still do more in terms of not just the productive inclusion program, which Dr. Adam just mentioned in respect to the 600 million. But we think that through the NBSSI, the government can still reach out to entrepreneurs in terms of giving training and facilitating some form of other social insurance programs. Also, we think that through the NBSSI, government can actually give some form of intermediation and information services to match employers with jobs, especially because if you look at the current situation, many more people in the services sector, in the manufacturing sector have already lost their jobs. We have a lot more teachers, especially in the private sector, temporarily losing their incomes. So all these are the areas that NBSSI can use to reach out to the needy. Now, we have the insolvency law already passed somewhere in March, which is, it's early day yet, but it's an indication that going forward, we can have some form of regulatory environment that can help, basically help firms or companies that are insolvent to properly fold up and then transferred to well-doing companies. So basically, for us, the bank, we support all these areas, and we are always in constant conversation with the bank, with the government, to actually embark on all these projects to be able to reach the poor. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought this line of questions should go to the chair, Professor John Gachi, but interestingly, it's being directed to Megan. So I would ask that both of you take turns to share some perspective. This one says, how will the School of Business use this pandemic to leverage on financial therapy? This has been ignored in our country for a very long time. Dr. Gachi, I think I'll give you the opportunity to respond to that. And then Megan will come on board to share some perspective on how Ghana can bring financial therapy onto the mainstream of education.
Well, thank you. Well, I think my HOD has indicated what we are going to do already. We are going to see to it that we bring on board as part of the portfolio of courses we have in the school to start teaching effectively personal finance and financial therapy related courses. So that is what we are going to take as a project. So that is the promise we can give the one who asked the question. But I also want to add some few things to what Dr. Anoche explained earlier on.
All right.
What we can do to support the SMEs and the micro businesses. I think there are two levels I want to consider this and add to what they explained earlier on. One is that there should be inclusive empowerment. So when I talk about inclusive empowerment, we need to identify a number of people that we can support beyond the 600 million. In fact, bear in mind that we are able to dedicate 600 million, even though it is not much. That tells you that we have the ability to dedicate some fund to support businesses, especially areas that we want to create some comparative advantage. So that is the lesson. That is the lesson that we are learning as a nation. That the things we've not been doing in the past, after all, we have the potential to do them. So that is the first thing within the inclusive empowerment I'm talking about. The second one is that when we come to the level of the businesses, the households, the families that have businesses, we need to also embrace the fact that we have learned during this COVID-19 period the power of creativity. So we need to empower our micro businesses, our startup businesses, our entrepreneurs, our young ones to be creative. And when they are creative and they are able to put in place their ideas that can generate productive services and businesses, then, as I said earlier on, we learn some lesson that we can dedicate some funds to focus on financing those ideas and creativity that have been generated. Then the next thing that I want to add to what Mr. Jan and Dr. Anoche said, that we also need to develop the culture of reinvestment in our businesses. We don't have that in the country. So many businesses are just behaving like the household we were talking about. No savings for the future, no reinvestment, no redesign of strategy. These are the things we have learned during this period of COVID-19. And if we package all these things and provide a proper education for our business sector, our entrepreneurs, I believe we will become a different country after COVID-19.
Megan, this is quite an interesting perspective for you to pick up. And there's a question from one of our attendees. It says, what suggestions do you have for families who are investing in buildings and other long-term financial assets in the wake of the pandemic?
Well, I think the rule of thumb with investments is that diversification is most essential. And so long-term assets are great, but if there is a need for short-term liquidity, that's going to be a little dangerous if all your savings is tied into it. So I think balancing that out with different cash flow options is probably the best strategy. I think the fact that the participant who asked that is so forward facing is a wonderful sign, though, because most of us do not think long term about our finances, and that's the way to acquire true wealth, is thinking long term and allowing compounding interest to really grow for you instead of against you. But I definitely recommend diversification.
Okay, and ladies and gentlemen, do share some thoughts on this, and I'll give the opportunity to Dr. Anoche to do this. And of course, if any of you would have some thought to share on that. This one is from Isaac Cheneboa Kodia, and Isaac says, I would like to ask that if an employee's salary is reduced by 50%, but has a loan repayment to make to a bank, and has very little savings or investment that could bring in some additional income, what advice will the panel offer? Secondly, what can such a person do to find some quick additional stream of income in order to meet to loan repayment, personal and family responsibilities? Dr. Anoche, you share some thoughts, and then Megan, because of her background, would also pick it up to share some thoughts.
Yes, thank you, and to the Isaac. Well, I think I will add little to what Megan said in terms of people investing in long-term assets. In terms of when it comes to times like this, it's better for individuals to prioritize the needs in terms of what is required, such that you don't jeopardize your future financial position, because you might think that I have enough funds, so let me go into these long-term assets. But we don't know when this pandemic is going to be over. So we need to be very careful in terms of our investment direction, unless you are assured of the stream where the distance your incomes are coming from. Now, when you come to Isaac's question, is interesting because because the person didn't anticipate that there was going to be a 50% cut in his salary, and had already contracted some loans. And already, when this 50% is cut, if you're not careful, you might not be able to even pay off the loans. But I'm sure there were some directives from some banks. I know some banks are giving some loans holidays for 6 months or something. They're not going to for their client to repay back their 600. So maybe what advice I would give to the person is to go and negotiate with his bankers to probably delay the payment. You have to negotiate, because if 50% of your salary is gone, it's likely to affect your income greatly. It's not this, because 50% is very significant. So what advice I would give to him is for him to go and negotiate with his bankers to see how they can delay the payment for maybe, and see what package they have. I think that's the best advice I can give to our friend Isaac. And in terms of saving within that period, it might be difficult, because already your income and your budget is distorted. So savings will be much the same. So you need to make sure that you stabilize your situation before you think about savings.
Okay. Megan, would you want to share some thoughts on Isaac's concerns?
I think I am at a disadvantage being located so far away that I'm not sure the resources available. So I know that if I had a client like that here, I would probably recommend right now there's a lot of financial counselors offering free services on virtual financial counseling that can give some debt consolidation or debt reduction strategies. So I don't know if there's any services like that available, but I think getting to meet with someone to talk out different scenarios, even if you know the right thing, hearing someone else say can often be really advantageous to you. So it might even be, since I know some free sources here, I'll put them in the links, and potentially, since it's virtual, maybe you can meet for free, knowing that there may be some differences in location availability of services.
Okay, but this is quite close to you. It has no distance. This one says the pandemic is already with us. Assuming the individual is in deep financial difficulty, what advice should be given to such a person, Megan?
Yeah, so there's so many things. If you are in extreme financial anxiety, I think of it as two-pronged. Like, what can you game plan to make your financial objective health better? What can you do to make sure you're spending at the least amount and making the most amount? And then for the anxiety, is finding a way to deal with it, separating what you can control and what you can't control, and letting go of what you can't control, focusing your anxiety on things you can fix and trying to fix that. And we have this kind of corny intervention we use a lot called the worry time, where instead of spending all day worrying about your finances, set a time at some point in your day where you say, I'm going to write down all the things that are bothering me. I'm going to focus my attention on just spending 30 minutes worrying, so that way your whole day isn't zapped by anxiety, and at least you can package it to one time and hopefully use the rest of your day to work on what you can change.
Okay.
So I hope that.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. You've been quite resourceful there. But Professor Gachi and Mr. Jan Kwachi, you may also want to share some perspective on this. This question says, Amma, this and many programs are important, but how can we get this important information to the majority of the illiterate small business owners who cannot read and understand these English language dominated discussions? Professor Gachi.
Well, thank you. I think as a school, we have what we call community engagement program. There are times that we bring our market women to campus. That is that was a time that we didn't have a COVID-19. We get a big venue, we congregate them, then we take them through some of these things in vernacular. We have done that before, and the engagement plan is still there. I am aware that the Department of Finance has escalated that into a radio program where they will discuss some of these important issues in vernacular, so that many of our people can benefit from the ideas, the guidance, and the rest that they have for the people. So that is what we can do. And we have various segments of this economy. I believe there is a need for the finance ministry, which have been managing financial education in the country. And the way we have been managing financial education in the country is weak, it's not productive, it's not helpful. They have a financial literacy week, and they gather and do some press conference, and we think that it's not engaging enough. So I believe that they should transform the way the financial literacy is done to be more engaging, more inclusive for the larger Ghanaian society to get access to some of this information. What we don't know, when you realize that during the period that many Ghanaians were affected by investing in some schemes that were described as Ponzi or not helpful, you realize that some Ghanaians have actually participated in multiple of such schemes. The reason is after the first experience, they didn't have the needed education and guidance. So they were not able to identify the pitfalls when they are going into some of these things. So that tells you that our engagement in terms of financial literacy, personal finance, and the rest is not adequate. We need to enhance it. So at our level, we are doing that in the school, and we are going to pay much more attention to it. But other segments within the structure of the economy should also enhance the way they go about it.
Okay, we have a number of questions here, so I thought Mr. Jan Kwachi, you could share some perspective on that. But I guess this is quite related to what you were doing. This from David Ajiman, and David says, there is little or no import and export in the country, but why is the dollar rate still going up, which is affecting these small businesses?
I think that there's the narrative of the city going weaker and weaker. I think that if you look at, for example, the development from January to date, you realize that around February, March, the city actually appreciated a lot and has resumed its usual downward trend, but not in that steeper way that we've seen, say, in the previous year. So if you look at the cumulative depreciation up to end of April, I would say that the city hasn't really done badly. But then in recent times, it is because, as you will notice, I think that there's still some imports coming in, especially from petroleum and so on. And then we have many other goods that are coming in. That's how come we still haven't realized much shortages as far as goods are concerned. Only that we had in March, April, we had food inflation going here because of the lockdown and so on. So I would say that the city hasn't, first of all, the city hasn't done badly cumulatively up to this time. So I think the narrative is what we have to look at.
And Mr. Jan Kwachi, I think I'll stay with you. There is a question from Shafiq Suleiman, and Shafiq says, the COVID-19 fund the government of Ghana is providing as support for SMEs, don't we think that there are so many requirements that many informal sector players can't provide, such as business registration, SNET registration, association to a business group before accessing the fund? What can be done going forward to support individual businesses or business entrepreneurs and household businesses, such as hand-to-mouth businesses?
Okay, thank you. I think that admittedly, I think the requirements are a lot in terms of the information that the program is actually asking for, and it would definitely be a hindrance to some or a lot of individuals or these SMEs that want to acquire this. But we also have to look at the positive side of it, in the sense that, remember, Dr. Adams was just mentioning that there wasn't even data in terms of how to reach people or how to reach companies. So these are some form of God-given instances where government can actually take advantage of in getting certain form of data to actually deal with. So it's more like and some form of positives that we can also look at in terms of going forward and getting more data to work with as far as these companies or individuals are concerned. So we can also look at the positive side as far as the requirements are concerned.
Professor Gachi, I saw you nod at the question that there seemed to be a plethora of demands on such businesses. You agree with the angle this person is coming from?
Well, I think I will consider this question from two perspectives. One from compliance with regulation, and then the second one will be fairness. Compliance, because I think the GRA came up some time ago. It was compulsory that all businesses should have TIN. TIN is one of the requirements. So if in the past 2 years, it was made compulsory for businesses to register for the TIN, and now to access the COVID-19 fund, it becomes a requirement. I do not think that there is any problem about that. What it means is that our willingness to comply with regulation is a problem. Secondly, even though some of these micro businesses and SMEs may not have the team, but we have a way of collecting levies, charges, and taxes from them. So the same way that we have been able to collect levies, charges, and taxes from them, we could use the same means to actually allow them to get access to this fund, especially if they meet some other requirement, so that the issue of equity will come to play.
Okay, Megan, this question doesn't have quite a close relation with you though, but I will still ask, so you share your perspective with us. And this person says, F.A. Kobna, what are some of the areas people can do personal investment apart from the usual treasury bills? But share with us perspective from your country, you know, apart from the major areas of investment, especially in the area in the era of COVID-19. What other, you know, micro levels of investment easily come to mind that people should consider?
Yeah, I would say real estate is still really popular. Along with treasury bills, there are CDs. Mutual funds are really popular because of the diversification built into that. And of course, other retirement vehicles like Roth IRAs and traditional IRAs. So I think there's a host of opportunities, and you just don't want to put all your chips in one area at this point, that we don't know what the impact of COVID is going to be. So having, if you have the opportunity to invest, making sure you do it in a way that has liquidity and has multiple touch points in case things shift, you can move it around.
Okay, Dr. Anochi, would you want to share the Ghanaian perspective, you know, areas apart from treasury bills that families can consider in this era of pandemic?
What happened recently? At times when you are recommending as to where people should save, it becomes, or people to invest, it becomes difficult for you to, and dangerous for us to venture into that, because you cannot guarantee, because areas that we thought were safe, it turned out to be unsafe. So it's very difficult to prescribe as to where people should save or should invest. But well, I think that depending on the quantum of investment that you want to do, if you want to invest the amount that you have is substantial enough, then you have to look at investing in real assets rather than looking at some of these schemes that are being offered, apart from probably because now the only money market scheme that I see safe for me is a probably government of Ghana treasury bill, because some of the banks that we thought were safe enough for us to do our savings turn out to be something else. So it's highly difficult for me to point out as to where people should send their money to, because I don't want to go into that unless maybe some other panel members have some idea as to where people can have safe savings or safe investment. I actually don't have much to say about that as to where they should send their money to.
Okay, well, it's important to hedge, isn't it? But this question says, as much as we are advocating for households and individuals to save and invest, I think the regulatory environment in Ghana is a disincentive for these initiatives. What are the views of our discussants on this session? And I wish I can give opportunity to all of you, but that's not possible. So Professor Gachi, if you can speak to this, I would appreciate.
I think the one who has the question is quite correct, because there are measures that the regulators have to take and implement When the banking sector cleanup was going on, or the financial sector cleanup was going on, you realize that a lot of the things that befell us should have been taken on board by the regulator. In fact, there was a situation where the regulator came out and outlined institutions which were credible that people can deal with. After 30 days, the same regulator came out that they have revoked the licenses of those institutions when you have encouraged Ghanaians to have locked out their funds in this institution. Some of them are not going to receive the full amount until the next 5 years, because part of the money have been wired into zero coupon bond to be redeemed after 5 years before they can receive their money. So I think we should look at the regulatory environment. The good news is that the key players within the financial sector have reform. They have new regulation. If you take the banking sector, the regulation they are using is actually was put up in 2016. If you go to SEC, the regulation they are using was put up as early as 2016. So they have some lessons enshrined in those regulations if we are committed and apply them fairly. One problem of the regulator is how to be professional, independent, and fair in managing the regulatory provisions. So, but we cannot live in a society where we don't trust anything. So we have new regulations put in place. We have new lessons infused in them. I am aware that the private sector arm of, I think the World Bank, that is the IFC, I think Mr. Jan can correct me, was very active in helping government to come up with some of these regulations. So if you want to talk about best practice, etc., are all infused in it. So it is now left to us to professionally, independently, and fairly manage the regulatory environment so that it can actually encourage people to trust financial institutions that regulators say that they are well and healthy.
Okay, thank you. So Abraham Anson, that was your question, and I think you're satisfied with the response so far. But viewers, remember that at 4 o'clock, we'll bring this conversation to a close, unfortunately. And I'm saying unfortunately because we have a number of you joining us every second, and a number of you are writing your questions out here. We may not be able to read all of them, but we'll try our best to see which ones our resource persons can answer to. Dr. Regina Jampo Vidogan says, information technology can play a major role. The question is, and Mr. Jan Kwache, you may attempt to have some responses for this one. How can information technology support individuals and institutions who cannot access any financial funding? Education and mentoring are key. With the World Bank, information technology can be a tool to track funding, spending on financial programs for central government and businesses. So the question is quite clear. Dr. Regina wants to know how the individual or how information technology can support individuals and institutions who cannot access financial funding.
For ICT, especially in our times, the importance of ICT is so important that we cannot ignore it. For example, currently all of us are working from home, and it's as if, I mean, even though we are experiencing the economy-wide, or we are talking about the economy-wide impact as far as the COVID is concerned, as some of us are home working, and it's even though it comes with some form of challenges, we still are able to deliver and be efficient. So in the same way, in terms of ICT and access to financing, I think this is the time that, for example, telcos have to work harder at it in giving individuals these kind of help that they need. For example, I could mention MTN, and for MTN, has started already giving loans, soft loans to its members. One challenge has been that because of the porous nature of our identification system and the fact that people are able to have multiple identities as far as owning these lines are concerned, MTN is actually having a lot of problem in retrieving their loans that they've given out. So I think that going forward, once we are able to, Ghana as a whole are able to have this identification system done well, then basically we can actually leverage on that even at this time where we are not supposed to actually go closer to these banks, and we are encouraged to stay home and still be able to have funds and work with. Thank you.
Thank you. For our attendees, I see a number of you making contributions. Your contributions are really appreciated, but we will rather selectively ask the questions that our resource persons would be able to respond to. So thank you very much for those of you who are sending us a contribution. This one is from Sian Frimpong, and Sian Frimpong says, will the World Bank be willing to collaborate with the Department of Finance to roll out financial literacy program looking at the benefit it brings? Mr. Kwabena Jan Kwache, would the World Bank be willing to do that?
Definitely, yes. I don't have to make promises, but the bank has quite a number of programs that definitely we collaborate with academic institutions in being able to reach the population as a whole. We've been supporting research institutions across the world and collaborating with them. From the bank's point of view, the bank has what we call comparative advantages in so many of these areas, and we pride ourselves as having the convening power to actually bring all forms of brains together to be able to deal with situations. So going forward, definitely the bank, once there's a chance of collaborating with the department to be able to roll out such programs.
Okay, Megan and Dr. Noche, let me have your perspective on the question that is also got to do with household financing and small business. This one says, if you are running a private school and has been hugely affected as a result of the close down of schools due to the pandemic, is it advisable to continue to pay salaries of teachers by going in for a loan or curtail such payment? Megan.
Oh, that's such a hard and emotional question, because I imagine as someone who is the director of a small program, not only do you have to deal with the financial aspects of this, but the relational aspects, that these are your friends, your colleagues that you are trying to make a decision about. I think at the end of the day, you want the school to survive for their long-term financial wellness, and I think for the children's sake. So I think you have to make, at the end of the day, to choose what is going to be the way to keep your school solvent. But I think potentially talking to your students and presenting different scenarios of furloughs may be something to protect the relational aspect of this decision.
Okay, Dr. Anochi, any perspective from your end?
Yes, I think it goes back to the issue of what we have discussed so far, that we need to plan. We need planning, because at times you realize that the school is doing very well before the COVID-19, for which our financial revenue were so huge that we could have established even endowment fund, for which we could rely on during times like this. It's about planning, because we don't plan for uncertainty. We don't plan for contingencies like this. So it's about issues of planning. And the other aspect too is that I've seen also some private schools that are also using online platforms to engage even up to basic schools, up to primary schools, and even up to class 2 and other things, in order to make sure that they stay in touch with the students, in order to be able to collect their school fees. Okay, so you can employ technology also to stay in touch with your students. But if it's a crèche, for example, then it becomes very difficult to stay closer to them. But even that, I think we can find some ways of engaging them if we want to do so. So I think that as businesses, we should learn to invest. We should learn to save. We should learn to plan against uncertainty. If we do so, in times like this, yes, I know some situations that it can go out of hand. But if within 1 month or 2 months of closure, you are unable to pay your salary, then there's something wrong with you, unless maybe the school is not well-established school. It's maybe a new school that you have started. But if it's a well-established school that you used to have a number of students and that, we should find ways to expand. And times that when we have inflows are good, we tend to only invest in the infrastructure that we want to expand. We want to expand. We want to expand. And this is part of most of the private businesses. We want to expand at a rate that we cannot accommodate, such that if we have even 1 week disruption, it could affect our finances. So we should make, as we are expanding our facilities, we should also make some funds sitting somewhere for time in times like this to cater for things like what we are going through. So I think that we need to do proper planning of this, and we should be able to pay our salaries, because we have contract with them. Unless probably now you say you want to disengage some of your staff, but if the person is still in employment, you need to either engage the employees and see whether they will take a salary cut, or there is a clause for you to lay some of them off. But if you are still using them and you say you will not pay them, then you are not being fair to the people.
I see. This one says from Nakokoi Ama, and Nakokoi says, what business sectors in times of financial crisis can help a spiral, gradual economic ease? Mr. Kwabna Jan Kwache, if you heard the question quite clearly, you may want to share some perspective on this.
Amma, can you repeat that?
Okay.
The next question.
So now Kokoi want to know what business sectors in times of financial crisis can help spiral gradual economic ease.
Okay. So I think that for now we know that what we need most is food, and we can never go wrong with food. So that is one area that definitely individuals may have to look at. Already we've seen people, individuals finding some innovative way of delivering food in without necessarily a person going to them and so on. So that is one area that individuals can look at, and not just food that you eat every day in terms of the perishable ones, but also processed ones that individuals, if you have a skill to do it and you have the know-how, this is one area that you can look at. Just to mention one area.
Okay, just to mention one. And so panelists, be thinking about this, because as we prepare to wrap up, I would also give you the opportunity to just make about a minute or two final remarks as we bring our questions, of course, the program to an end. This one is from Audrey. Audrey Nkrumah says, in other parts of the world, like the US and Canada, schooling is changing and the job market demands are changing also to more of a technical and engineering know-how. This involves heavy financial investment. Relating it to Ghana, if schooling takes this dive, how will it affect the financial well-being of the people? Dr. Anoche, I think your background, you could share some experience with us regarding this question.
Well, in terms of changing the dynamics of in terms of training, like the way the person who asked the question said that they are changing from more to technical aspects. And indeed, if you look at our setting, what has happened in our within the COVID-19 area time, we've seen that we need a lot of technical know-how, technical areas. Because, for example, the areas that we are benefiting from, business that are benefiting from, and the people who are benefiting from what has happened are those who have technical know-how and who are able to use their hand to do something in terms of engineering and those things. Those are the businesses that are booming in this time. And indeed, that is what we need. It's just unfortunate that most of our education are being centered on humanities. They're not just to say that we are not saying downplaying the issue of humanities, but we think that where we are, for us to industrialize, we need to take engineering education very serious. But you realize that in most cases and most of the different programs that people want to look at, because we don't have a lot of industries and the service sector is booming, we see most of our students entering into the humanities instead of going into engineering because they don't have readily available jobs in the engineering. Unless we transform the economy is transformed into that aspect. We cannot, for people will look at what they can easily get a job after graduation or after school. So they will definitely move into the humanities instead of moving into the engineering. So until the economic structure is changed, we will continue to go into the humanities instead of moving into engineering.
I think our next round of questions, well, these are all contributions, so I'll skip them. Elizabeth Cornelia Anand says, from our experience during the lockdown and the social interventions being put in place, can the World Bank, as part of their developmental agenda, support developing countries to map out the vulnerable communities and develop real-time database devoid of politics for future occurrences such as COVID-19, Mr. Kwabena Jan Kwache?
Yes, thank you very much. With the World Bank, already we've had some work done, especially the National Household Registry. I remember Dr. Adams mentioned it, and we did that for the 3 northern regions for the LEAD program to benefit from. But then we think that with government's understanding, this should be moved throughout the whole country. We have, since the outbreak of the COVID-19, we've been having conversation with Ghana Statistical Service. We've been collaborating with them a lot. With our colleagues in the poverty sector have been developing some questionnaire to be able to do these kind of surveys. Currently, there is business registry that has been launched by the Ghana Statistical Service, and our colleagues have really been very much involved in this. So we've been in the space and helping government do these things, and we think that way forward, government needs to work harder together with the bank to be able to build this database so that based on our experience now, we could be able to respond better. Because if you cast your mind, the challenges that we had in terms of reaching the needy, there was a lot of challenges because there's no available data to be able to, for example, know where to reach the needy in Accra when the temporary lockdown was instituted. So these are the challenges that we have, and these are the things that we need to, the government together with the bank, these are the areas that we need to look at, to learn from, so that we'll be able to respond to similar experiences when it comes. Definitely these are unavoidable, but in future when it comes, we'll be able to respond properly.
Okay, and Mr. Jan Kwachi, help our viewers, because this one want to understand the kind of intervention the World Bank can also make. It says, how is the World Bank and other supporting institutions ensuring that the business support scheme rolled out by the government do not go to party faithfuls because we are in election year? Can the World Bank do anything about this?
I think that the World Bank usually deliberate a lot with government, and basically currently we call it budget support coming on. Then these are the conversations that we've had. Of course, the government has its own prerogative to be transparent, and the bank has to trust the government on that. Of course, if there's a project, if the bank is funding specifically such a project, then definitely the bank would definitely give its terms. But then these are government programs, and the bank has to trust the government enough to be able to fairly give out these funding. So the best is that the bank has to trust governments to be able to embark or implement their own projects. Thank you.
Thank you too. But Professor Gachi, would you want to share some insight in this?
Well, I think I only want to make a brief comment on the data aspect.
Okay.
I believe the COVID-19 comes with a lot of opportunities for us to learn and to redirect our investment. We have come to the realization that data is an asset for economic management. Data is an asset for planning. We need to invest in data. We also quickly have to see our national identification process as a tool for development and not one-sided reason for the national identification system, because that could form the basis of trying to generate some form of data for the management of our country. So we'll be able to get the data we need for various reasons as we go along, for planning, for the kind of investment we want to make in our people, because the picture is very clear that post-COVID management will focus on people. So you need data to be able to do that. So I think that's what I want to emphasize.
Okay. This question says, Dr. Noche, what are the determinants of financial security for an individual in the COVID-19 period?
Thank you. For one to be financially secured, in fact, it's an individual matter, or it depends on the person's own perception of how he sees himself, whether he or she is financially secured. But some of the determinant is our own financial behavior, which we need to look at our financial behavior. The way we used to do things, we cannot do it the same way within the COVID-19, because in terms of our consumption pattern should change in order to stay secured. If, for example, before the COVID-19, every day you have to spend 1 cedi or 2 cedi on entertainment, and you think that cannot be sustained, then you need to make sure that you have to look at it, you have to refocus. So in determining whether you are financially secured, you need to look at whether you can meet your future financial obligation and whether there is some certainty in terms of your future financial streams or incomes. So you need to look at all these aspects to say that I'm financially secured. But if you look at your income and realize that there's some uncertainty surrounding its inflow and there is uncertainty in terms of even your current situation, then you cannot say that you are financially secured. But we need to look at our behavior, financial behavior, because somebody can be financially literate, but his behavior using the literacy or the education that the person is having to better his personal life is not there. The link is not there. They are financially indisciplined in terms of how they spend their money and that. And if you are not disciplined with your money, no matter how big the income is, you will not be able to sustain some of the lifestyles that you choose to live with, and you cannot be secured in the future. So for you to be secured, you need to look at your financial behavior, and then you have to be disciplined with finance.
Okay. Dr. McCoy, this question from Magdi Abaka says, we have also some people working with private firms whose salaries have been suspended. In the interim, what would you advise such people to do to handle their households, especially when they don't have any investment or savings?
I think if you do not have money, I think I'm not sure how to help when you don't have money. You need to have money to be able to use money. And so I think at that point you're in survival mode and trying to find other sources of employment or government support or potentially friends or family to provide a bridge to when you can gain full employment again. And I think at that point, like I said, it's survival mode to try to find something. I don't think you can deal, in psychology, we talk about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that you need to have your basic needs met before you can worry about any kind of lofty ideal things. The same thing with finances. If you don't have any money coming in, you cannot worry about investing or saving or anything like that. You need to make your bills happen first. So I think at that point, you're just in survival mode.
Okay, and for our attendees, Dr. McCoy has already shared the link to the financial advice that she was talking about. So it's in that column where you sent your questions. Please make sure that you make use of this very rich resource. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I think our time is almost up. We will hold on with the rest of the questions because thankfully this is just the first of the e-seminar series. We'll be having it over and over, and so just ensure that you keep this page active, and then we'll give you updates on the very day and the time that we'll be having another session with you. Before I say bye-bye, I want to take your closing remarks, and Professor Gachi, you're going to be the last person to speak because the chair will give his closing remarks. I'll start with you, Dr. Anochi Mohammed Adam.
Yeah, thank you. I think that as we are talking about the household financial situation and how to deal with it, and with government coming in terms of assessing most of the interventions that government is rolling out, I think government should take advantage of that to take as much as possible data from the people, especially in this, the issue of assessing the COVID-19 fund, and they think that the requirement is so stringent. I think government, in terms of business registration, those things can also be added as an intervention, so that people can register their business for free. Those who don't have it, you can add it as a part of the intervention, because we need the data for future use. So in times like this that you don't have, the people are in distress, you can use that as also part of the requirement, but just that you don't add to their burden by asking them to pay, but rather you can ask them all other things that they can access in terms of data for you to pick the data from them. You can make them freely available to them, and then you get the data for future use. Because now we need to formalize our system. We need to formalize our system, because the issue of whether there will be fairness or there will be no fairness, whether the money will go to political parties, supporters or not, depends on data. Because if you don't have data to deal with, that is where people use their discretion. But if you have well-structured data, it will, yes, people can divert to those, but it will be minimal. In terms of how they can deal with the data, will be deal with the funds can be monitored when there is available data to work with. So for me, I think that for us to touch the base and for us to deal with the problem, we need to formalize our system and also have much data on our household so that we can identify those who are in need and can direct our policy interventions to.
Okay, thank you very much for your remarks. I think I'll take yours, Mr. Kwabena Jan Kwachi.
Okay, thank you very much. One thing I want to say is that the impact of the COVID-19 is still unfolding, and looking in the near future, we don't seem to know the exact impact that is going to have on people's finances, their household, and the economy as a whole. All the projections that we've made are good enough just to let us know where we can be, but then the exact impact, just to say that we don't have the true impact of our grapes yet. So basically, there's that uncertainty coming into play based on the government's decisions and also the individual's decision. Now, we also know that for government is really a major player in this pandemic time, and what the decisions that government take are really crucial to be able to help household as well as the entire economy to withstand or to be resilient going forward. And in that case, we also have to also know that there's a trade-off with respect to what the government have to take, the decisions that it has to make. For example, how does the government choose between letting people out to work so that they can earn their livelihood, or letting them stay indoors in order to save them as far as the virus spread is concerned? Also, just as Dr. Adams said, with respect to data, there's the lesson that going forward, government needs to build on its databases to be able to help it really respond to these kind of incidences going forward.
Okay.
For example, there's the need for good data to enable evidence-based and adaptive policy to make those decisions. So basically, going forward, these are the areas that we think that we need to learn to be able to impact in the future experiences.
Thank you very much. Megan, your final remarks.
Yep, I love the theory of social capital, which says that we have so much resources in the people we communicate with and the connections we tap into. So make sure you're using the most of your social capital by communicating with your family, friends, faculty members, any resources you can find in community to build on that and hopefully translate that social capital into economic capital to help yourself during this time of COVID. And I look very much forward to working with all of you guys more and helping you integrate financial therapy into your curriculum. Thank you so much.
Same here, Megan. Thank you. And Professor Gachi, please, just make it very brief for me.
Okay. I just want to thank our discussants. They have contributed effectively. They have met our expectation. There are some few takeaways. I think we need to now concern ourselves with conservative investment. We don't have to involve in reckless investment. We need to also be conservative in terms of our expenditure. I think another takeaway is that there is a need to create a space to support innovation and creativity as one of the support base for post-COVID economy. And I think another takeaway is that data is an asset and we need to invest in it to use to continue to support the economy. Our investment as part of our financial therapy should also be focused on protecting our retirement. Retirement planning and investment is key in personal finance. Investing in areas that can support entrepreneurship of your own children and family is key, is an important part of financial planning, is an important part of personal finance. So these are the takeaways. Skill is an asset. Skill is the source of money, is the source of revenue. So we need to focus on these things. So I just want to thank you one more time for your participation and your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chair. And for those of you who joined us, my guests for the maiden edition of this e-seminar, we have Mr. Kwabna Kwache Jan, or Jan Kwache, and he is currently, or he serves as a co-task team leader of the World Bank's investment finance project. Mr. Jan, thank you very much for joining us for this afternoon session. We also heard from Dr. Megan McCoy. Dr. McCoy is a professor of practice and the director of the Personal Financial Planning Master's Program at Kansas State University. Megan, you've been very resourceful, and we're hoping to have you once again. Thank you very much. I've also been engaging with Dr. Anoche Adam as a senior lecturer in finance and head of department of Finance School of Business, College of Humanities and Legal Studies, University of Cape Coast. Dr. Anoche, I sincerely appreciate all the engagement, the preparation stage up to this time. Thank you so much. Professor Chair is the Dean of the School of Business, University of Cape Coast, Professor John Gache. Thank you. There's been a lot of applause on the platform. People are commending you, so when we are done, make the time to read all that. Is that okay? And my name is Mary Amabawa. I'm a broadcast journalist with ATL FM. Our dear attendees, thank you so much. You've really engaged the platform and you've made the conversation very lively. Thank you all, and do have a very blessed week and of course, a very beautiful season. Bye-bye.